Is it true that you can only absorb 30 grams of protein in one meal or sitting? Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. I thought I would chat about this today. This is one of those questions that I still see a ton online. In fact, I see posts all over fitness groups and everything else to this day where people are asking about it. Like, well, people say this, and the fact that this is even a thing in 2024 actually kind of shocks me because this whole idea was debunked more than a decade ago, and I don't know any coaches, any sports dietitians, any real experts who actually believe this idea. So it seems to be one of those that is still a very popular and pervasive myth that nobody believes. And what we need to be clear on, when people say that, they're like, oh, the science changes. Well, no, this was never something that was, to my knowledge, let me be clear. To my knowledge, I don't remember it being demonstrated in any sort of clinical trials that this was the case back in the day. Like even when this was a big deal, I never saw any research in humans showing this. Okay, so we need to be clear. It's not science if someone just comes up with an unproven hypothesis. Okay, so we need to be clear. If some scientist or doctor somewhere says, I have a theory, I have an idea, okay, and it's left there, that's it. Hey, I got a theory that might be true, okay, and that's just it. They just have a theory, no experimental data. All right, that's not science saying it. For science to say it, you usually need at least a few studies, minimum of a few, before you can say, yeah, science seems to support an idea. You know, it's got to be some clinical trials. There's got to be some data, trying to test it and try to debunk it. Well, that's not really what was happening with this. This idea itself, and I'll go into why it was even silly to begin with. It doesn't even make sense, first of all. But the people who were pushing it were supplement companies. Why? Because they're selling protein shakes. And let me be clear, I am not against protein shakes. I use whey protein. I think protein shakes can be valuable. I think they can be useful. However, that doesn't mean a lot of nonsense hasn't been used to market and sell more of them in the past. Okay? So let's be clear on that. So I want to state that again. A product can still be useful and still be good even if a lot of nonsense was used to promote it that wasn't true. Okay? They're two separate things, particularly if they're trying to push sales more. Well, that was the whole idea. The idea was, well, you need 5 or 6 servings of protein a day of whatever, 30 grams or 25 or 8 servings. And because you can only absorb so much towards muscle protein synthesis, or even absorb it all so much. Okay. That was the idea. All right? Because it's good, it's easy to sell shakes because people don't want to eat 6 meals of chicken every day. And I'm not saying a lot of people don't, but I mean, if that was what people were being told, okay, that hey, we need to do this, and then it's like, oh, so then we have these fast absorbing ones and it'll really work with all these smaller meals, buy our shakes. Because that's what you have to do, because you can only absorb so much anyways. All right? Ironically, the protein shakes, you're able to actually absorb more of some of them like whey than a lot of the other foods you're eating, incidentally. But I digress, back over to the point. So this stuff was used to sell products. Like, this was a marketing ploy. It wasn't based on reality. And here's the thing. We knew for years and years, first of all, evolutionary-wise, it doesn't make sense. Okay. We also know that it really just seemed to be a case of there's an hourly limit. Okay, and that was the real science was showing, yeah, you can only absorb, X amount of protein per hour. And I think even way back then, it got way more exact, and we found that it varies way more than this, depending on protein type, digestion, individual genetics. So it's not a set number, so you can't even say, oh, well, chicken breast in all humans absorbs at 8 grams of protein per hour. Okay, because it varies from person to person. But yeah, so there was even some studies showing, no, it looks like we can absorb around, 10 grams per hour. That was what the data was showing. So you see where they're going with that? Oh, so 30 grams every whatever. No, but that's not what was happening. It doesn't mean that per meal. It means total. So in other words, yes, had you eaten 100 grams of protein, if you're absorbing about 10 per hour in your gut, yeah, that's 100 grams, you'll absorb it over the course of 10 hours. And it doesn't matter if you split it up in 3 meals or you have it all in one. That's what the actual data was kind of showing. That, yeah, there is an hourly absorption rate, but the timing of it doesn't have much impact on that. By much, I mean much. It doesn't mean zero. Yeah, it can affect it in certain ways, positively or negatively. But, that was a lot of it. But then what we find over time, better gut health actually literally changes that number. Okay? Certain protein bioavailability changes that number. Digestion, all these things, digestibility. They all factor into that. But yeah, there is a threshold of how much you can absorb per time. But when you choose to eat it isn't the factor. In other words, if you eat 300 grams of protein, even in one meal, you're basically going to be absorbing it for the next 24 hours. And that's kind of what was known even back then. And it doesn't make sense because historically humans had to get large servings of protein at one time. In other words, even all throughout prehistory, when our ancestors took down a big animal, that wasn't something they did every day. It might be something their tribe successfully did once a week, and then everyone gorged on the protein. And then they had other stuff in between, obviously. So oftentimes those large servings of protein were something that might only happen once or twice a week, a huge amount, and they got a lot less the rest of the time. Okay? So to think then that after generations, thousands of generations of this, that we wouldn't have, developed the ability to absorb large servings at once and utilize it, would have made all of that non-beneficial. We would have seen shifts in our gene flow to allow for this. It makes sense. And then that's exactly what we saw in the data. But then kind of putting it all to the end, someone finally did some studies just in this last year to where they gave people like 100 grams of protein versus a much smaller amount, like 30 or 50 or whatever it was in a meal, and then tracked the muscle protein synthesis. Not just the absorption, but the muscle protein synthesis. Because we know the absorption just continues. Like if you way overeat in one meal, it takes longer to absorb it. But what they found, literally the 100-gram meal just caused a much longer, prolonged curve on the increased muscle protein synthesis. Okay? That's all it did. You did not use it. In fact, it just lasted longer. Right? Which is exactly what we would expect to happen. Right? That is literally what we would expect based upon the fact that we have a limit of absorption per hour. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.